The School of Shamanism, Master Tatankananda, returning to the earth a person at a time.
Sunset, moonrise, and see how the land is bathed in silver hue. You feel so lonely. Come with me and let me show there are others just like you, who feel the powers of earth, sea and sky, of dragon and fairy and shades of the night. Hear the call of our ancestors of blood and bone, of womb and tomb and standing stone. Lady, stir your cauldron well, chant your words and sing your spell. Deep within this darkened hall, hear the goddess Ceridwen call. See a man alone on a hill, his arms raised high to the moon, chanting words, a charm, a spell of power, a witch's rune. He calls to the powers of earth, sea and sky, of dragon and fairy and shades of the night. He calls to his ancestors of blood and bone, of womb and tomb and standing stone. Lady, stir your cauldron well, chant your words and sing your spell. Deep within this darkened hall, hear the goddess Ceridwen call. Come and taste of the cauldron's brew and magic she will give to you. You will dance in the eye of the storm, your Ceridwen's children, the cauldron born. A charm of silver, the gypsy said when he was just 17. Your future I'll tell you, every thread and turn, if they're to be seen. She took his hands, tracing the lines, searching for patterns and looking for signs. Your life a construction, one day you will see, through the illusion and into the dream. Lady, stir your cauldron well, chant your words and sing your spell. Deep within this darkened hall, hear the goddess Ceridwen call. Come and taste of the cauldron's brew and magic she will give to you. You will dance in the eye of the storm, your Ceridwen's children, the cauldron born. So we stand on this hill, our shadows are cast by the moon, chanting words, our charm, our spell of power, to the powers of earth, sea and sky, of dragon and fairy and shades of the night. We call to our ancestors of blood and bone, of womb and tomb and standing stone. Lady, stir your cauldron well, chant your words and sing your spell. Deep within this darkened hall, hear the goddess Ceridwen call. Come and taste of the cauldron's brew and magic she will give to you. You will dance in the eye of the storm, your Ceridwen's children, the cauldron born. Oh lady, stir your cauldron well, chant your words and sing your spell. Deep within this darkened hall, hear the goddess Ceridwen call. Come and taste of the cauldron's brew and magic she will give to you. You will dance in the eye of the storm, your Ceridwen's children, the cauldron born. You're the cauldron born, cauldron born. We're the cauldron born, cauldron born. We're the cauldron born.
This is Master Tatankananda, and you're listening to the School of Shamanism. It's a product of theschoolofshamanism.com. You can skip on over after the podcast and look at the website, www.theschoolofshamanism.com, and I am Master Tatankananda. My email address is mastert@theschoolofshamanism.com. Today's podcast has to do with the priests. The priests, the rabbis, the imams, the preachers, the pastors, all of these people are living in the memory and promoting the memory of when the time film entity was actually charged to the point of having its own existence. But since the energetic charges, since the energetic worship, and the offering of gods and sacrifices of the kind that cause anxiety to feed these gods that list, these entities that live on this kind of energy, when that goes away and the god is diminished, the priests are already all in. The priests were already there doing the life of the god when the god was manifesting, when the time film entity was denser than the time film and was actually manifesting things that convinced people that the god was, in fact, a god. When the god diminishes, the priests know that. That's why they're constantly trying to drum up more people to come into the house of their god, to promote their god, to feed their god. In this day and age, it's very difficult to sacrifice animals. It's very difficult to sacrifice humans. It's very difficult to give the energy field food that the time film entity needs. So when it begins to fail, the priests try to keep it alive. Now, they try to keep it alive through many ways. They try to keep it alive by remembering its memory, by rehearsing what the god used to do, although the god doesn't do it anymore, but he used to do, or she used to do something, and so they promote that because their living depends upon it. Their living depends upon it. It's the first priests that acted on behalf of the entities as they were being fed, as they were acting, as they were making things happen on this physical plane. The priests were invented because the priests helped feed the entity, and they kept it a very close club of those who could feed the entity. However, when the entity diminishes, when the entity begins to fade, the priests who know that's the case turn the actual functioning time film entity into an intellectual enterprise of what used to be. All priests, all imams, all pastors, all preachers know that the God that they worship, that they have turned into an intellectual enterprise, that they defend with the words of people who wrote about the God when the God entity was actually functioning, they turn it into an intellectual enterprise because the God is no longer functioning. The God is no longer denser than the time film. They can't feed the God enough food to keep it alive, so it's a memory. It's still on the time film, but it's a memory within the minds of the priests, and they continue to spread what the God used to do. If you want to go listen to an imam, a preacher, a pastor, whoever you want to go listen to, go ahead, go listen. You will find out that it's a constant history lesson of what the God used to do. And, given the right circumstances, what the God might do again. There are many churches arising in the world that are claiming, hey, our God is doing something, but that doesn't really happen, does it? They say it does because they think that the excitement of the people, that the worship of the people can re-energize the entity on the time film, and it's not true. To re-energize the entity on the time film, to actually be able to act, there has to be the same kind of energy fed to the time film that caused the entity to arise in the first place. And most of the mainline religions, including Judaism, including Christianity, including Islam, the time film entity that took on a life of its own was violent because it arose from a violent exposure. Well, Christianity can no longer be part of any of feeding the time film entity with violence. Although they do pretend to re-sacrifice Jesus every Sunday, there's no anxiety, there's no blood, there's no time exposure, overexposure, there's no high emotional anything, and so it becomes a form. It becomes a form. A form. It's true that way with the Jews. The Jews remember what their desert God Yahweh did. However, they never even expect the God Yahweh to do anything now, neither do the Christians. And they make up all kinds of excuses why the God does not do now what it used to do. Well, that's because the God has diminished from lack of food and has taken on the same density as the time film and exists only in the memory of the priests, the imams, and those who have something to gain from the people believing wholeheartedly in what the God used to do, and they pin it on people that if they don't believe what the God used to do, that there's eternal after-death punishment for not believing in what the God used to do. Used to do. Can you imagine that people are expected to be totally devoted to a God that used to do things but does not do it now? Why is that? Because the priests have made it a total intellectual enterprise of rehearsing the memory, using rituals to rehearse the violence, like sacrificing Jesus, to remember what happened, like on the Day of Atonement when all the sheep were slaughtered among the Jews, and the priesthood of the Jews, when they used to sacrifice bulls and goats till blood was running in the street. They can't do that anymore, so it's become a memory exercise, with the exception of the rise of Islam. Now, I want to talk about this rise of Islam because what's happening is that although Allah was born off the time film and became very dense off the time film and got a life of its own in the life of Muhammad, which was extremely violent, the Islamics have learned that you have to feed the God violence, and so they created jihad. So that when people kill themselves and blow other people up, those exposures are directly related to Allah. Those exposures are directly related to feed the God Allah, to feed the entity, the time film entity that has arisen. And that's what makes them so dangerous, because if they keep feeding this violent God Allah with even more violence, eventually Allah will become denser than the time film and will be able to act on behalf of those who are consistently feeding it. This is the violence of Islam that is so dangerous. It's not only dangerous because it's counter-societal and because it's counterintuitive to blow people up in the name of God, but with the offer of paradise after death, they're willing to do it. And why are they willing to do it? To get a big bang after death, with a big bang here with dynamite. This is how the entities, the violent entities on the time film act. And if they get a chance, they will be fed. Notice imams don't blow themselves up. They get other people to blow themselves up. The imams only explain the reason why they need to be blown up. But they never blow themselves up. I find that very, very, very interesting. In the Middle Ages, the Christians tried to feed their God with burning of heretics. The Jews, as far as I know, have never tried that. But the Islamics, they are feeding Allah. When they bow 5 times a day, they are feeding Allah. When they cause violence, they are feeding Allah. And I wouldn't be surprised if Allah didn't manifest sometime as a time film entity that is able to manifest to the point that Allah can be self-directed. Allah can cause things to occur. Visibly, empirically, on this plane of observation. And that is the scary part. That's the scary part. We don't want violent time film entities that have no life of their own, but only feed on the negative energies of other people and their devotion. We don't want this to occur, to have it manifest, because then people who see it manifest will begin to feed it out of fear, if not fear alone, which is exactly what the time film entities want that are violent, and they have to have that kind of food. It's not that I'm against Muslim people. I'm not against the idea of Islam any more than I'm against the idea of Christianity or Judaism or Buddhism or Jainism. I don't care. But when you're actively feeding through violent acts of violent exposure on the time film, there could be, and eventually will be, a manifestation of the God they're feeding. That's why we can never say any of these religions are peaceful. Because for the time film entities to exist, they have to be fed panicked, terror time film exposures. That's the only way that these time film entities can live. But the priests are very dishonest, aren't they? They know that the God is not there. They know that they're talking about a memory and a memory alone. But yet they keep getting benefit from it by the people who pay them to remind them of the memory of the gods, and how if you don't keep that memory right and believe in every detail of that memory, that you then are punished or rewarded eternally for your choice. What does this have to do with earth-based spirituality? Absolutely nothing. It's true that the gods have arisen due to the earth-based principle of the time film and the overexposure of the time film. But this is not earthly. The process is earthly, but the result is damaging to humankind. In the next podcast, I'm going to talk about the arising and the perpetuation of what I'm going to talk about is the spirituality of responding positively to the peaceful events on the time film. And this is how it used to be. This is how it used to be in many cultures before the violent time film entities took over human history. Remember, the ancients were not stupid. These entities did exist. They did exist. There was one time that Mount Olympus actually had time film entities that had become independent, squabbling among each other and living on Mount Olympus. Now, I know I'll be mocked for that, but it's because I give the ancients more credibility than anyone wants to give them. They weren't stupid. They were observing something. And it was either a time film entity or an alien, and if it was an alien, I wonder why they went away. But with the time film entity, I know why they went away. People lost interest. One people came with their set of gods and overtook the others, and so one god fades away while the others come to the ascending. Right now, in our culture, the Christian God is diminishing. The Christian God is becoming less dense, and so it's taking on more of a time film quality, a memory quality, than an actual active quality. Islam, not so much. They are trying to feed Allah, the time film entity that we're going to call Allah. They're trying to feed it until it actually does take on an active, aggressive, empirically verifiable manifestation. And that cannot happen, because that kind of violence, being fed by fear and violence, will become a tyrant of this planet. And here's the news: it has no life of its own. The only life it has is the life that people give it. And the sacrifices, the needless sacrifices and misery of animals that are put to death in order to give the horrible exposure to the time film. And this is how gods arise, and this is how gods decline. So in the next podcast, I'm going to talk about cultivation of gods, of time film entities, that are the result of worshiping and adoring whatever gave rise to that time film entity, and how we should actively seek to participate in that earth process so that we can have what's called spirituality. And what is spirituality? It's knowing how to interact with the time film and how to pay attention to what the ancients thought was right. That the ancients thought was right in the earth-based spiritualities, so that we can continue. So that we can continue on this planet as we were supposed to be continuing by cooperation and support of the earth itself. You've been listening to the School of Shamanism broadcast. I am Master Tatankananda. I hope you enjoyed it. Drop a line. Be sure and subscribe. It throws energy towards the podcast. If you want to go to the website, www.theschoolofshamanism.com. And if you want to shoot me a line, masterT@theschoolofshamanism.com. Thanks for listening. I hope you enjoyed the podcast. And be part of this new movement to establish earth-based time film entities that can actually help us change into a world that's more benevolent and less filled with temples to what used to be. The School of Shamanism, Master Tatankananda, returning to the earth a person at a time.